Welcome to Hey Chaplain. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. The Hey Chaplain podcast is about talking to police officers who say, "Hey Chaplain, I've got a story to tell and some hard-earned wisdom to share." The guests on Hey Chaplain come from across the world, from the LAPD to Scotland Yard. They are sharing their wisdom so that you don't have to learn the hard way. And as a police chaplain myself, I think you deserve something positive and encouraging. One of the most discouraging elements of law enforcement is wondering if you should call it quits. How do you know when to make that decision, especially if you're in the first half of your career? It's incredibly difficult to give blanket advice to this because everyone and everyone's circumstances are unique and they're constantly changing. For some officers, the best advice is to wait a moment for the storm to pass. But other officers, it's time or maybe even past time to get out. F-15 fighter pilot Brian Udell is often quoted as saying, "There are two kinds of ejections. The first, where you have time to go through the controlled ejection checklist, and the other kind, where you barely have time to realize you're dead." Today, we're talking to former Deputy Josh Lively. Josh started a promising career in law enforcement, but soon discovered that this might not be the career that fulfills his calling in life. We're going to talk about the process of figuring out what to do when you're miserable as a police officer. What does that mean? How do you know what decision to make? And how far do you push it before you need to eject? My guess is that every police officer can sympathize with what you're going to hear Josh say. But there are going to be two distinct camps of listeners to this episode. Those who hear Josh's story and recognize it as their own, and those who don't. But I hope you listen to Josh's wisdom on this difficult subject because we all know cops who need to stay, and others for whom it is already time to go. Here's Josh Lively. Hello, Josh. How are you today?
Hey, Chaplain. How you doing? I'm doing good.
I'm doing well. I'm glad you're on the phone with me. I got a chance to do your podcast, and I really enjoyed it.
No, I appreciate having you on. It was fun. It was so interesting to get someone else's perspective from your kind of background, too. Because most people I talk to are not in, that law enforcement mindset. And
well, I knew that you had prior law enforcement experience, and now you've been in ministry for several years, which means you work with people. You work with children. You work with parents. You work with people in the church. You have this background, and I felt like it gave you some perspective on leaving law enforcement. You didn't wait till retirement. You didn't wait till you were vested. You served for a period of time, for a chapter of your life, and then you moved on. So let me go right to that point. When did it hit you that maybe you weren't going to keep doing this job?
There's a couple of different points where it hit me. The first one was I absolutely loved the academy. I loved, for the most part, FTO. It was a culture shock for me. One of the things I would get in trouble for is I smiled too much. And I was, and not in trouble. I never got
no reprimands for smiling.
Yeah, no, nothing like that. But it was definitely you shouldn't probably be happy so often, which was kind of a culture shock for me. But I remember my first day at FTO. And I walked in with another guy that hired on at the same time as me, and we're standing in the parking lot at the district waiting for our officers to show up, and this lady came walking up to us, and not even thinking, hey, we're in full uniform now, we have our gun finally, it's legit, and she just started going in, and I remember sitting there going, I have no idea what to tell this lady. And I was top of my class in the academy. I was top of my class with the recruitment that I went in with. And like,
And you were a hair older than the other
I was,
recruits.
yes.
Yep.
So I went in, I was right around, I think 28,
Yep.
29,
Okay.
somewhere in there.
So you had some maturity.
Yeah. And I came from like a professional background. Like I've dealt with people before, but she was talking about like she had gotten kicked out of her house or something like that. And the landlord wouldn't let her get back in. And in my mind, I was like, no, we're going to go get you in the house. And then I was like, wait, I don't know legally if we have the authority to do this.
Yeah.
And then me and this other new guy are talking, and I was like, there's cops inside that can help you. And, you know, I can walk you into the office. And I remember walking in, I was talking to my FTO about it. And he's like, you know, you can't just pawn off people. Like you have to handle your own calls. And I was like, but it wasn't my call. Like I was just standing in the parking lot. And I remember at that moment going, I think I just bit off way more than I can chew. You know, and I had my first FTO was a great FTO and, you know, really walked me through some of that stuff. But it was very much, overwhelming. And I remember I would be going home every night, just like, oh my gosh, like there's no way I did what I was supposed to do. Like this is definitely more than I could have ever thought.
Was this in a big department, small department, high volume, low volume?
We had 402 sworn deputies here in Volusia County at the time, and we would handle in the district I was assigned to. We would handle anywhere between 60 and 90 calls for service a night.
So constant, always calls pending.
Yeah.
Okay.
Always.
All right.
Not in comparison to other departments. Like, you know, I've met some guys from bigger counties and they're like, dude, we always have 40 calls just on log. And I was like, well, I mean, we're not there, but you know, for me, it was very over because I am very much that here's a checklist of things. We got to get it done. So I'm constantly looking at call list and I'm like, oh, send me that one. Send me that one.
To me, the big difference is whether the calls are pending. If
Right.
you have a call waiting on you when you clear a call, that's different than having downtime in between.
And I didn't have the best, you know, and I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but my zone partner was a lot more proactive and not realizing, hey, that's great that you just did this traffic stop, and wound up finding, you know, some drugs or a warrant or whatever. But now I have to handle all the calls in your zone too.
Right.
You know, so you know, there were more than a couple times
waiting on you. Yeah.
Yeah. And there were more than a couple times I got hung out to dry like that.
Yeah.
And it was like, you know, because my FTO, that was one of the things he beat into your head. No one does paperwork in your zone. That's your zone. You handle your calls. So for me, I was very much stuck in this box of like, this is mine. I need to make sure I handle this. But that feeling did kind of go away right after the beginning. And for the next like year or so, I was like, okay, I'm gonna put into this. You know, I was the only one working in my family at the time, and I've heard what some departments make. We were not on the higher end. We were only at like $33,000 a year for a family of 5. So there was a lot of overtime. There was a lot of, you know, I think, and on our one interview, you know, we discussed my first 43 days on the road after FTO, I worked straight.
Yeah,
Department
that's
policy
about as bad as anybody I've heard.
I mean,
because departments with a strong union would have stepped in and stopped that somehow.
Right.
But to go more than a month and
not
have had a day off, that's unusual. It's not unheard of, but that's unusual. Yeah.
I never had an on-call because some of those days were on-call days, but I never had an on-call that I didn't get called in for.
Yeah.
Like ever. Like to the point where I was like going to other shift leaders and like, hey, are you like, hey, Josh is on call tonight. Why don't you, you know, call in, you know? But, you know, I loved the job itself. I always wanted to help people. And that was ultimately why I became a deputy. I wound up getting laid off from construction in 2008, and I was like, I got to do something. And I always had that hole inside of me going, you know, I want to help. I want to make my community better. I want to, you know, give a voice. And I got bullied a lot growing up. So I went, you know, I want to stand up for those people that can't stand up for themselves. Yeah. And so, like I said, that feeling went away. until I noticed every Christmas I worked, every 4th of July I worked, every Thanksgiving I worked, because the senior guys would get to pick and choose. And as a lower guy on the totem pole, you kind of just had to pick up all the slack. And then I came home from work one day and my daughters, I have twin daughters at the time who were only like 2, were walking. And I was like, man, I'm missing everything in life. And at the same time, I was coming to a realization within myself, and I'm not saying this is everyone's case, this was definitely mine. But when I would arrest someone at the beginning of shift and then get called out to a domestic at the end of shift, and it's the same person I just arrested.
Yeah, they're already
and it's
back
like,
and,
yeah. And I was like, hold on, I'm losing my life, missing all of this. And honestly, for what? After they've gone to trial and the case is over and the state attorney sends you, here's what happened. I forget what it was called now. But you find out, all of this work you just did was null processed or pled
Right.
down to where it's just probation. Like I remember going to one call one time and this lady had just been beat to a bloody pulp. I mean, there was blood all over the house. You could see where she was drugged through the house and, I guess boyfriend, baby daddy had taken a 2.5-pound dumbbell that they had at the house and just beat her with it. And,
Oh, wow.
and so we were working the call like it was a homicide.
Yeah, could have killed her.
Because, on the way to the hospital, even the paramedics were like, we don't know if she's going to make it.
Yeah.
So it was, we're going to just go ahead and treat it like it's a homicide. That way, if it goes that way, and she did wind up pulling through, and all of that. But the guy, we put a warrant out. He finally got arrested and all that, went to trial. And it was like, he got 8 years of probation and like court ordered anger management. And I remember when I got that I just went, for what? Like, what am I giving up everything for? Yeah. And nothing is being done on the other side. Nothing. We're not helping anyone. We're not like, and at that point, I was getting very bitter inside, and I know I wasn't being the husband I should be. I wasn't being the father I should be. My days off, it was like, no, I'm sleeping. Like I haven't slept in a week straight. Like I gained a bunch of weight with all the free soda I could get from 7-Eleven, but I wasn't taking care of my health. I wasn't taking care of like my mental state. I was like, and I was just starting to deteriorate. And I remember it was cold outside. It had to have been around Christmas time or right after Christmas time because cold is relative. I live in Florida, so it wasn't like.
So you're wearing a parka in the same weather I'd be wearing, like shorts.
Oh, right? 100%. So, yeah. It was probably like 60, but I remember going, it's kind of chilly out. And I was sitting at a school and I was working overnights. It was like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I was sitting there. I had taken my AR out of the case in the car. And I don't know how serious I was with it or not, but I had it right here up under my chin. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I hate the person I've become. I hate everything I'm missing. I hate just the loneliness, which was actually one of the hardest for me. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I don't know what else to do. I'm at the end of my rope at that time. And like I said, it was like 3:30 in the morning. I used to keep my phone in my front pocket and all of a sudden I felt it vibrate. So it felt like my heart was kind of fluttering and it kind of like jolted my attention enough. And I opened it up and it was a text from my wife who I'm sitting here going, what are you doing up at 3:30 in the morning? And I opened it up and it was a picture of our 3 kids laying in our bed. And she's like, they kicked me out of the room. I guess it's the couch for me. And in that moment, I went, what am I doing? Like, I'm going to end all of this for what? Because I'm mad and I'm bitter and I'm tore up. And I went, no, this isn't how it's going to end. This isn't how it's going to go out. And that was really when I went, I got to do something.
A career change might be in order. Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you have support from your family to change career? Because it's a huge investment of time and energy and emotion to become a police officer, so
It
to
is.
become a deputy.
It is. It's, and again, I don't know what other states are. I know here in Florida, it says 770-hour course, which took me 7 months. If you went to nights, it's a little over a year. And then even the process of getting on, it's a 3 to 6 month, process of interviewing your neighbors and your panel interviews and your qualifyings and all of that.
There's an emotional cost because it's a dangerous job for like your family has an emotional cost to it. Yeah.
It's a thankless job. You're not the fire department where everyone loves you. Like, no one calls us to be in parades except SWAT or something of that nature. But,
right.
And it's like, so as far as support went, I did go home after that shift and I did explain to my wife, hey, I've been holding this in for a while. I've been trying the best I can to like mitigate all of this and figure all of this out. And my hope was if I could get to a specialized unit and off of the road, that this stuff would just kind of go away and work itself out. Yeah. And unfortunately, none of those doors opened.
But did you have support from, I don't know how much extended family would be involved in that kind of decision, but you certainly had a wife and kids. Right. Did you have support to change and go do something else?
I did.
Okay.
My wife was like, we will figure out whatever, because I was the only, like I said, I was the only one working at the time. So, it was definitely a scary moment sitting here going, if I can't figure out something else, how are we going to eat? My parents were, very, hey, you are more important than this and we'll figure it out. And that was always my thing. I never wanted to look back and go, I had a good career. And I know like some of the guys I worked with, that's what held them. It was, the career over everything else. I wanted to look back and see a lifetime. And I wanted to look back and go, I was the best father I could be. I was the best husband I could be. I was the best me I could be. I helped people and people were better because I was in their life. And I knew that wasn't happening with where I was. And yes, my wife was very supportive. She was like, we will figure it out. Our faith plays a big part in that too, though. And I knew that there's a God that would provide. And so I had the strength to be able to go, yeah, this is scary. And I don't know what I'm going to do if I leave here, but I'm going to go do it.
Did people try to talk you out of it?
I did have some like coworkers that were like, hey man, like think about what you're throwing away. And you worked hard to get to where you are, just kind of hang in there. I knew some guys at other departments that were like, hey, you need to come work over here because, we don't have as high call volume or, we have a little more support. You wouldn't be working the overtime you're working. But in my mind, I went, I went to a different department that had better hours, better equipment, better everything. It's still going to be the same thing.
Yeah.
It may take a little longer to get to that point of breaking, but it's still going to be there. I remember I had a ride along, a new class that was coming out and a new recruiting class. And I got stuck with one of the ride alongs. And so we're driving and he's all, he's brand new. So he's like, oh, that car, is doing 46 and a 45. Let's get him. And I was like, look, man, I love your enthusiasm, bro, but no, we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is we are going to go patrol a park right now. And, and I remember him going, is this all this job is? Like, where's all the foot chases? And I was like, I remember being brand new too, going like, where's the excitement? And I loved most of the job, the adrenaline and the chasing and all of that. And I loved what could have been. Like I would spend a lot of time, like I said, trying to go, if I can get into a specialized unit, I really wanted to do investigations. There was an investigator that came in and talked to our recruiting class and me and him kind of hit it off. And, he was like, hey, once you get off probation, come look me up. And I was like, yeah, this is, it never worked out though. And I went, how much are you going to sit there and suffer? And how far are you going to try to push yourself trying to go, oh, if I could just hang on a little bit longer, listening to that kid riding in my car. I was dimming his excitement because of my own bitterness. How am I helping out the department? How am I helping out the people of the city if I'm sitting here like going, this job sucks and I hate every minute of it? And
You're a wet blanket on all the new recruits.
yeah. And now you become a cancer. And I go, that's not good.
Right.
That's not good for morale. And
before we started the interview, I mentioned to you that as a chaplain, I talk to a lot of officers, and they fall into pretty distinct camps. And sometimes I can even tell pretty quickly which camp they're in. Sometimes I can't. But there are cops that I am trying to convince to stay, that they need to bid a new shift or even lateral to a new department, but they need to stay in law enforcement because that is really their calling to do that. And then there's others where I am trying to convince them to leave because, frankly, it would be better for everybody if they would just, they gave us a chapter of their lives. We very much appreciate that. They kept the manpower numbers slightly higher just by being here, and we appreciate what they offered. But this chapter is ending, and they need to go do something else. And 100%. so I'm in situations where I might go one direction or completely the opposite with an officer. Can you talk to me a little bit about being called to law enforcement versus being called to something else? Or maybe a different way to phrase it, what's the difference between being called from something versus being called to something?
Oh, absolutely. If you were to read Psalm 139, all right, it does talk about in there, you saw my unformed substance, and in your book was written every single day of my life. So I go, we are all called to something. And the problem is a lot of us try to fit a square peg into a round hole. There are things about law enforcement that I absolutely loved. Yes, I do believe in my heart of hearts that you, as a law enforcement officer, you are holding back the darkness. You are pushing back against evil. You are taking a stand and fighting for those who cannot or will not fight for themselves.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love that. And I know that's a part of my calling. However, that doesn't mean that that's the only area in life that specific calling can be used and can be useful. And when you're called to something, it is just that something you wake up with, you go to bed with, that everything else in your life takes a backseat to that. You know, and I worked with plenty of deputies that you knew, like, you are a cop through and through.
Yeah.
Like, there's just nothing else in this world that
wouldn't be happy doing anything else
at all.
No.
You know, and then I worked with a lot like myself that it was like, look, man, I'm sure there are parts of this you do like, and who doesn't like driving fast with lights and people getting out of your way? But on the flip side, if the most exciting part of your night is after 2 a.m., 7-Eleven gives away all of their brand food so you can go get an entire bag of food in a Mountain Dew, like, probably not in it for the right reasons.
That shouldn't be the highlight of your day. No.
And I go, so that calling is just something I think you're ingrained with. You either are or you aren't. Teaching, because I am a full-time teacher now, as well as being a pastor. Teaching, that's another one. It's a calling. You don't get into it because you're going to make $1 million. You don't get into it because it's going to make you famous. It's just, I love teaching people things. I love their eyes when they learn something new. And I go, sometimes I know, well, not sometimes, I know I would not be where I am right now had I not gone through this. There were a lot of things that were shaped and molded and forged in me as a law enforcement officer. I do think to a certain extent, it did harden me up. And I know I needed to be hardened because, I was a little too happy-go-lucky. I was a little too, let me look at the good in everything, and what I was being brought to needed a little bit of that.
Needed some realism in your life.
Let's be realistic.
Yeah.
And so I sit here and go, for some people listening, they may be in that boat where they're sitting here going, hey, you know what? You are here for a reason right now. And maybe you fulfilled that. And maybe it is time to like go seek another venture. You know, maybe it is time to take what you've used here and learned and gained and go use it to be more useful somewhere else.
How do you discern when it's just low morale? How do you know when it's just discouragement versus your calling?
Oh, absolutely.
How do you pick through the bad feelings and know if this is a temporary feeling or this is an indicator of where you're really supposed to be in life?
I would say the first thing, because even in ministry, I mean, in your background, like there are times even in ministry where you doubt your calling.
But plenty of discouragement for sure.
Oh, absolutely. You're working with someone who's taken 3 steps forward, but then all of a sudden is 48 steps back. And, and you're sitting here going, maybe I'm not, maybe I'm the problem. I go, the first thing would definitely be you have to let go of what you feel and hold on to what is real. Because a lot of times we are led by our feelings. And sometimes it's just a bad day or a bad week or a bad month. And then sometimes it's something deeper. And I think the easiest way to pick through that and discern through that is just like a calling is that thing that you wake up thinking about and you go to bed thinking about, and it just occupies everything. When you are being called away from something, you just can't get rid of that. It is always there. It is, you wake up, like there were times, in all honesty, where I was like, man, if I just shoot myself in the foot, I could write it off as an AD, but then I have a light duty situation, and at least that'll give me time to like figure out what my next move would be. When you're sitting here and that is what's preoccupying your mind, would I've ever shot myself in the foot? Probably not. Like, I don't want to be that guy that had the AD.
But that's a pretty dark and drastic place to be where you'd self-harm. Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, well, when it's that all consuming, then I think at that point you've kind of answered your own question. When it's changing everything about who you are and what you hold dear to, because I've met a lot of guys, man, like they started bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to, change the world. And then next thing you know, you're a full-fledged alcoholic. And, if you're not on shift, if you're not 10-8, you have a drink in your hand and you've changed the fundamental being of who you are. And I go, at that point, who are you helping? Like, you're not helping yourself. Like, that's why when you're in an airplane and they're like, if the oxygen masks come down, the first thing you need to do is put yours on, because if you're not well, how are you going to be well for those around you? Yeah. And I think that's something, I know there's a lot of departments that have really good EAP and really good different like mental health things. And I know there's a lot of guys, especially some of the older retired guys, that are coming out now and doing like anti-suicide and
becoming chaplains.
Yeah. Because we don't have that support in law enforcement. There isn't a lot of people that are willing to sit down and listen to you or walk with you when it's inconvenient. And you're not the kindest person in the world. You are, just disgruntled. And I think at that point, that's when you should really start seeing, like, when no one else is walking with you anymore and you are completely changed from who you would be, maybe it is time to really challenge yourself and go, hey, is it me? Am I the problem? Is it time to hang it up? Is it time to turn in the gun and badge? And is there something else? And even when I went through church planting, that was the big thing to even answer this question. Is there anything else you can do? Because if there is something else you can do, go do it.
That's what we say about ministry in my circles is if there is some other job you can do, go do that. Do not be a minister in a church. Do not get up and preach on Sunday mornings. Don't go counsel folks. If you can go sell insurance or work at a construction site or something, if you can to go do that instead.
See, and I struggled with that.
You better feel compelled to do this, because there are just some jobs that will chew you up and spit you out if you're not compelled to be here. It's the story of Jonah, where Jonah was told to go to a certain town to go preach, and he didn't want to. He went the opposite direction, got on a boat and left, and they threw him overboard, and he gets swallowed up by a fish and vomited back on the beach. Like, okay, you're going to go to that town. Well, you better feel that way about what you're doing in life. That if you stopped, God would swallow you with a fish and vomit you back at that job site again. You better feel like God needs you to do this. But how do you know if your calling is just a general go help people, and you understood that to specifically mean become a police officer, but you're miserable being a police officer? How do you know? How do you split the hair between, well, I generally do need to help people. I must go help people in my life. That's what my life must be about. But maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I should have become a firefighter. Maybe I should have gone and done something else. How do you sort that out if you're a young person trying to figure out what you're supposed to do for the next 40 years?
See, and I think if you're young, you're ahead of the game. I think one of the disservices we do as a society is we try to pinpoint, at 14, 15 years old, hey, what's the rest of your life look like?
Yeah.
Instead of going, hey, go try. It's not like when you take a personality test and it goes, hey, this is your personality type. These are the jobs you should go do. It's, hey, these are the areas your strengths are in. Mm-hmm. And then I think you need to take time to explore those. Not everything you're going to do is going to be a home run. Not everything you're going to do is hit it out of the park. Yeah. You had said about firefighters. Yeah. I probably, had I gone to the fire academy, I would have probably retired as a firefighter. I mean, it's a job where you get paid to sleep. I mean, how do you go wrong with this? Like,
now you're going to offend all of our second responders.
No, right. And I go, no, I love all of them. I mean, everybody serves a function, right? We're one body, and a hand can't tell a foot, I'm better than you, even though you use your feet more than your hands. But I think we've lost that, that just go explore. Like, hey, try things and go work and do things. And, it's easy enough to look at a job cluster. These are jobs that help people. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There's a million of them out there. Now you can start like drilling down and going, okay, well, let me try that. Well, that definitely ain't for me. And I think that's one way. I think another way is do research. I mean, we live in a time where you travel around with a supercomputer in your pocket. Yeah. Things like law enforcement, go on ride-alongs. Because the hardest thing for me was that first day where you realize, oh, this is nothing like any movie I've seen. This is nothing like you are a secretary for the most part, showing up after the fact, and that was hard for me. What do you mean we're not chasing bad guys with our gun in our hand, through public streets and not getting into shootouts every other day? And I mean, I left law enforcement and went and was a laborer. I went from bad to worse, the bottom of the totem pole. And when I left law enforcement, I went to work for a municipality in construction, which is what I was into. The guy that got stuck riding in my truck was that youth pastor we were talking about before we started recording here. And me and him just got to talking one day, and next thing you know, like this conversation led to this conversation, which led to this conversation, which led to this whole conversation about church planting that I didn't even know that was a thing. If you're not willing to take a risk and do the things that scare you, like I said, leaving the sheriff's office was terrifying for me. Yeah. But I know this isn't where I'm supposed to be. I don't know where it is I'm going, but and again, I mean, I can go so many, Genesis 12 and Abraham, right? Go to a land I will show you. Sometimes in faith, you just got to take that first step, and it's going to be scary, but especially if you're a cop, you live for being scared anyway. You love the adrenaline dump, so just do it anyway. What's the worst that's going to happen to you?
Josh, thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you for the different ways that you've served.
I appreciate it, Chaplain.
I want to thank Josh for coming on the show, and especially for being so incredibly transparent. It is not easy, even after several years, to go back and talk about a time when you're that vulnerable and you're making decisions that so many people are going to criticize no matter what direction you go. Look, I obviously want every police officer to have a long, happy, healthy career. But I also recognize that it is necessary to sometimes just give one chapter of your life to law enforcement, and then to move on and do something else. If that's your decision, then God bless you, and thank you for serving. We really are grateful for the time that you were able to give, and we can't wait to see what you do next. On the next episode of Hey Chaplain.
Sometimes it's messy, sometimes there's tension there, but also I think we come up with better solutions. I think it's from the Harvard Business Journal. They talk about how grumpy orchestras play better than happy ones. I love that. I always tell my students that, like, if there isn't any tension on your team, then you're probably just a little bit mediocre, right? Like, because nobody has the guts to say that sucked and we need to move on, right? So I think a little bit of tension can be healthy, right? And help us do better work, and we learn from each other through that.
Hey Chaplain is a free resource for everyone because of those supporters who are quietly helping behind the scenes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you want to help this show reach more cops, chaplains, and other first responders around the world, please follow the link in the episode description to support the show. The views expressed here are the personal views of the host and our guest and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. If you like this episode, please share it with a cop or someone who loves a cop. Thank you for listening to Hey Chaplain, and as always, let's pray for peace in our city.